Hello, everyone. Huge welcome to our International Women's Day online event. Now it's the time to accelerate towards gender equality, the role of executives demanded in 2022. So I am so honored to co-host this event together with Focus Core and Ikigai Authentic. My name is Yuta Hasumi. I'm Managing Director of Ikigai Authentic. It's so lovely to meet you. So I really appreciate your dedication with us during this pandemic and also some gloomy, chaotic matters around the world. So your solidarity means a lot to us, and we are so committed to continue embracing gender equality. So today, I would like to take this moment to celebrate Women's History Month and the International Women's Day with you and your colleague and the family. So Ikigai Authentic is a global diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting firm. And day to day, we have discussed with our brilliant clients how to embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion in business, set a numerical target, inclusive female representation, and a higher diverse talent. So I also would like to take this critical opportunity to further discuss how we can move forward gender diversity from today. So my first question is, are you happy with all of the gender diversity happening in Japan? So let's break the bias together. So today's agenda, so please allow me to share, the trend and the solutions around like gender diversity in 2020. Then we are fortunate to have great speakers to share their perspectives and also best practices. So Danny Risberg, President and General Manager of Baxter, Japan. So he's down to earth and quite a well walk the talk leader. So he's going to share his best practices. Also, we will have Nancy Ngou, associate partner of EY Japan. So she is an D&I expert as well as one of the brilliant female role models. Also, we are happy to co-host the event with David Sweet, founder and CEO of Focus Group. So he's my mentor, and so he's leading inclusive hiring in the job market as well. Right, let's get started. So remember, 6 years ago, 2016, what was one of the most significant change in Japan? So Japan's government addressed the Women's Promotion Act, in Japanese, Josei Katsuyaku Suishinho. So at the time, many companies set the numerical target for next 5 years between 2016 to 2020. Then it was the last year that many organizations assessed that last 5 years, if they have made the expected progress or they could do better and more. So what was your experience? You feel like, you have made huge progress, or like you could experience lots of great things happening in your organization. So last 5 years, our gender diversity has improved worldwide. And according to Refinitiv, Japan has grown the most in the average percentage of women on corporate boards. The percentage of women on boards of director has risen to 8% as of 2021 from 2.1% in 2016. Also, female managers in Japan now 8.9% in 2021. But however, compared to other countries, Japan is still very behind. In the UK, the percentage is 34.3%. Also, Japan placed 121st in the global gender equality ranking of 153 countries in 2020, falling from 101 in 2022. So there is still a long way to go. As many of you know, the theme of International Women's Day 2022 is the Break the Bias. So addressing gender diversity, what are the biggest challenges? So I would like to articulate three main biases that stand in the way of gender diversity. So bias in herself, bias in organizations, and a bias in society. So firstly, bias in society. In Japanese society, there is a term joshiryoku, which refers to the feminineness of someone. The kanji means woman power. So they identify their gender at the age of 2 and try to be girly by 6 years old. Once grown up, women limit their opportunities in promotion and reaction, relocation for their partners compared to men. Also, mommy truck, even in the States and Europe, 70% of jobs are still full-time. So it tends to become mommy truck with limited career progression when women take part-time roles. Then, secondly, it's bias in organizations. Many organizations breaking these biases in society by addressing DE&I initiatives, but due to the lack of gender diversity over the past years, organizations still have unequal mentor and sponsors. So according to some statistics, men has much more sponsors in the organization than women, even by 50%. This also means that many female employees feel that there are no female role models. So often heard voices such as there are few female managers, or we cannot be like her who works 24/7. It is really important to increase and also spotlight female role models, also to emphasize anyone, regardless of gender, can be role models for women. So 64% of women feel that their voices aren't heard when they strongly suggest their opinion. They are seen as being emotional and unfeminine. So this is a form of microaggression. So women are sometimes suppressed and at times even treated as someone of a lower position than their actual job title. So lastly, bias in herself. Women often hold biases against themselves as a result of the external forces of the bias in society and in organizations. Please look at the graph. So as the graph shows, women have the desire to become managers, but are much less confident that they will be able to become one compared to men. So in another survey, the question, so are you superior to your coworkers in performance? 70% of men answered yes. On the other hand, 70% of women answered, I am on the same level as them. So there's significant confidence gap. Also, this shows what women also another important factor with career progression is corporate politics and developing internal networks. So less women prioritize developing internal network with senior leaders and also dealing with corporate politics, often as a result of their self-biases. So also, so when we are applying for jobs, so 70% of men apply for the jobs so men apply for that job, 70% matching their experience and skills compared to 100% women. So, many organizations, we have been working really, really hard to tackle these biases. It's still a long journey. So we have done mentorship program, role model session, so women leadership program, 女性活躍, 女性管理職研修. Also, we formed the employee resource network and more. So now, what else and how can we do better to promote women actively and create a gender diverse company environment. So the key today is senior leaders' accountability for gender diversity. So in addition to existing programs, it is critical to involve more and more senior leaders and management, leverage their influence and accelerate their accountability. So having discussion with global clients. So there are two trend practical ways on high demand. So one is sponsorship, the other is allyship. Probably many of you already agreed or addressed the sponsorship program and allyship program. So first, I want to introduce about sponsorship. So sponsorship is a program, as you know, where we pair those in upper management and executive positions with female candidates for management positions for 6 to 12 months. So the sponsor will support the sponsee's advancement and own their accountability by assigning them important work and a project which will upskill their leadership capability and experience. So sponsor will also leverage their privilege and influence to support the sponsees in improving their visibility and gaining promotion. For instance, in meetings concerning promotions or succession planning, and in the other situation that demand decisions, the sponsor will put their name forward and endorse their ability and achievement. So this will ensure that the meeting members can make a well-informed decision and will encourage the organization to nurture women in management. So what is the benefit of sponsorship? So not only do the sponsors feel greater career advancement satisfaction, they perform better and will stay with the company longer. So for example, 68% of women with sponsors feel career advancement satisfaction. Also 53% of positive career promotion from sponsorship. Close to 120% higher rate of having ideas of sponsored women in STEM market careers developed. Also, 85% of sponsored women with children continue to work full-time and seek out leadership positions compared to 58% of those without sponsors. So next one is let's turn our attention to allyship. Have you ever heard about the concept of allyship? So it's important to equip senior management with ally leadership. So what is an ally? And so who can be an ally? So an ally is someone who can be relied on for support and allyship, and someone who can support communities affected by discrimination or underrepresentation to not be part of the communities themselves. Then, ally can be someone who first understands the issue faced by communities affected by diversity, approaches it as their own problem, and proactively advocate taking action to promote diversity. So all of us can be an ally for everyone. So gender diversity, both male leaders and female leaders have to be ally for gender equality. So having a strong allyship culture has a direct link to the company impression, as it increases the likeliness of employees recommending the organization to 167%. It will also allow organizations to retain talent, develop a strong talent pipeline, as those who have at least one ally in their workplace are almost 2 times as likely to feel a sense of belonging. Similarly, our employees are 50% less likely to leave an organization that employs strong allyship and an inclusive culture. So this will influence its organization's performance. So 69% of organizations see progress when men are engaged in gender inclusion program compared to 30% where men are not engaged. So it is easy to say, we can all be an ally, but how do we become an ally? So Ikigai authentic. So we follow this 5-step model methodology. So firstly, make the most of your privilege. So as a member of the majority, so you have access and are entitled to things which people in the minority group do not. So you need to recognize your position and the privileges that accompany it and make the most of it. So step 2, actively seek feedback. Allyship is not a one-way street. So you must interact with those around you, so people who are in the minority as well as your fellow allies, and actively seek feedback from them. The step 3, become a sponsor for the career of others. Through sponsorship program or not, like become a supportive figure for a sponsee and guide them toward their career advancement. Then step 4, be a voice for those who face discrimination and underrepresentation. So one of the privileges that is, so sometimes if they are in the minority group, like they tend to be hesitant to raise their voice. So as an ally, you can be proactively their voice to seek, the inclusive policy and culture as well as career advancement. So these are the steps to become an ally. But the reason why the organization address diversity, equity, and inclusion is for business growth. So put all of this to work in business. So leveraging diverse talent, also the taking advantage of influence and also privilege. So you will drive innovation in business. So this is 5 steps to becoming an ally. So, thank you so much for your attention on the first part, articulating gender diversity trends, as well as leadership's accountability as sponsors and allies. So now I'd like to hand it over to David Sweet, who is moderating crucial panel discussion with 2 amazing inclusive leaders. Over to you.
Great, thank you, Yuta. That was very insightful. I appreciate that. So welcome, everybody. My name is David Sweet. I'm glad that you are joining us this evening. I'm very pleased to be here with Nancy and Danny. Before we jump into questions and answers, let's do some introductions and some backgrounds. Nancy, start us off, please.
Hi, yes, Nancy Ngou. I work for EY. I've been here for 37 years. I lead our inclusion practice. It's culture change and inclusion. I am Chinese American. I'm very passionate about DE&I. Having lived here in Japan for 14 years. I'm a strong ally for anyone who feels like an outsider. And so I'm really happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you, Nancy. That's great. And Danny, welcome.
Hi, thank you, David. Thanks, Yuta. Thanks, Nancy. My name is Danny Risberg. I'm here as currently the GM of Baxter in Japan. I'm the expert of many, master of none in many years of doing different things. So I guess I'm here today to talk about some of my experiences and really what I think we all should be doing is making a better society and being successful together. And that takes a lot of work, honestly. So hopefully I can participate today in adding value to that. Thank you, David.
That's great. Thank you. So one of the questions, Nancy, for you that I received was you as a successful female leader at EY with a successful career. In your career, have you had sponsors or allies to help guide you through your successful career?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. I've definitely had sponsors in my career. From when I look back at every milestone in my career, I moved from LA to New York. I moved from a tax position into a leadership position where I eventually made partner. I moved from tax into HR, which eventually led me into Japan. And I look at each one of those milestones and how I was presented with those opportunities. And those are opportunities I would not have mapped out on my career when I graduated from college, but they were opportunities that were presented to me by people I had been working with in the past who saw something in me. They appreciated the work that I did, and they presented me with those opportunities. So while it was great they presented me with the opportunities, I also had to trust them that they saw something in me, and that they, could see me doing what they asked me to do, even though I had no idea if I could do it or not. For example, when I moved from being a tax partner to being a head of HR, like, what did I know about HR? But obviously that sponsor saw something in me and felt I could do it. And I had to trust that I could do it, even though I wasn't 100% certain. Yeah.
Just to expand just a little bit on that, Nancy. So not only they introduce you into a position and put you there, what about the follow-up and afterwards? Was there, that kind of assistance, the mentorship, the guidance that to help you be successful and grow within the role, or how did that work for you?
I think what at that point, it was, they felt very vested in my career, and of course their reputation, because they're the ones who had recommended me. So yes, we did stay very close and we stayed in touch, and I knew that if I had any challenges, that I could go to them and ask them questions. And there definitely were times where, I would check in with them and say, here's what's going on. What do you think? So it was more like went from a sponsorship to a mentorship, where they were giving me advice and helping me to guide the politics of the organization and things like that. But because they knew me so well, I felt very comfortable going to them for advice, and they felt, I don't know if they felt obligated, but they definitely gave me the time. Absolutely.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think if there's a takeaway, I will have lots of takeaways tonight. One of them, I think, is not only guiding someone in the sponsorship, but then how to convert that into a learning mentorship. It's not just letting go. And I think companies that want to flourish, that process needs to be there and grow organically and be pushed along as well, right?
That's such a great point. And one thing, in these situations where I had sponsors, it actually wasn't a formal program. These were people that I had worked with, and when I worked with them, they appreciated my work. And because they appreciated my work, I wanted to work with them even more. And so we had a working relationship where they could trust that I was going to perform well. So I think that that's really important too, is that to me, the first thing you need to do is do the very best work that you possibly can, right? So you have to be performing, but look for the people who appreciate the work that you do, right? So someone had asked me, how do you find a sponsor? It's like, well, I find them, but they find me. I intentionally work with people that appreciate me. I think that's natural because you want the positive affirmation. And it's fortunate that, I chose people that have a voice, that are willing to speak up and, use their reputation for you and stand up for you when there's something because sometimes things don't go right. And so they need to say, well, yeah, things didn't go right, but we're fixing it, whatever the case may be. So, yeah.
That's great. Thank you for that. And Danny, moving over to Baxter, and Baxter's got a great reputation, and in Japan you've done wonders. And so one of the questions that we had, as you as a leader have demonstrated your accountability and commitment and to gender diversity, how do you do that within your organization? Was one of the questions that we had posed was just, what do you do and to make that happen as a leader?
Thanks, Jim. I look at, thank you for the opportunity here. But, I look at within Baxter, which is my role, and then I have a personal role in what I do. I think core to us as a team, meaning Baxter, is, it's not any single individual. So the organization itself has to say, hey, let's embrace this, let's support. And so you start understanding the value of diversity and really building high performance teams. And then that rolls down to where you go. Because I think Nancy touched on, hey, there's great to get sponsors. It's great to get everything. But, they enjoyed that. And it comes from, she was actually doing a wonderful job, and so you have to appreciate that. You have to expose that and do that. So unless the group needs to understand first, so you can do many things. When directly to your question, in Japan, what do? I looked at what everything Baxter is doing, and the first thing I did, I took personally and say, hey, I need to be responsible. So it's all about everybody. So I tried to learn, I tried to study, I constantly try to look at what are the issues and what is my role, and then take some responsibility of that, because just talking about something doesn't make a difference. You have to say, okay, the company says this, but me in Japan, if I'm the GM and the president, what should I do? And I need to be responsible. So you need to take ownership as first, and then you need to implement programs. And sometimes it's discussion, sometimes it's getting out there. So transparency is clear, it's needed. So you begin transparency, you start showing people what the real situation is, what the value is, and then you say, what can we do? And it's not good enough to hope that everyone will embrace it. And the reason I say that, I think 99%, whatever you would say, I think society, people want to do the best thing, but that doesn't mean they're going to do it. So as a company and as a leader, you have to say, okay, here's a target we're going to try to hit. Hey team, my leadership team, here's what we're going to do. We're going to sponsor, we're going to mentor. I want to have everyone on my leadership team mentoring and sponsoring at least 2 people. How do we do this? And so it rolls down through the organization. So how do you take responsibility? First, learn, be passionate about it, and be responsible for it. You can't do it alone. I can't. So you need the organization to do it together. And so you got to build the right team. You got to ask people, and you got to make sure people are passionate. You can't just make someone do something. They have to want to do it and understand it. So you have to educate them. You have to educate the team. So it's really communication, education, and then roles and responsibilities. If you define those with the goal of being a great organization, that's proven by all the literature that diverse organizations do better. So use the facts, make sure people know it. That's how I look at how to be responsible to do it. Now, in the detail, there's a lot. I won't until questions or something later because I don't need to know. But it comes down to, I need to be responsible to get people to do it, but I need to allow and help people to do it. So there is a succinct difference there. And I think they're both equally important for all the GMs or leaders or anyone involved here to understand that Be honest about it. What is my bias? I need to learn that. So we have bias understanding programs. You have to have a lot in the background. Everybody starts with a bias. So we need to make sure we understand what our biases are. They're not good. They're not bad. They're the truth. And then you work to improve it. So it starts with understanding, ownership, and then the passion to continue to get it done.
That's great. Thank you. There's a lot to unpack there. A couple of things that listening to you speak, that I would question and wonder about. And please, anybody else have questions and answers for questions for Nancy and Danny, please throw those in the Q&A box. We will try to tackle those tonight. Danny, two things that popped to mind was, one being the GM. It helps that you lead from the top. I think that's an easy one, that you can kind of decide this is the right thing to do, that there's resources globally, we're going to start implementing these, and you strategize and you start rolling those out. What advice as the GM would you give to someone who's not the GM and they see that they need to start implementing this within their company, and they need to kind of convince the GM, or they need to educate the GM? That'd be one question. The second question is around maybe what you've done or what you might suggest based on what you've learned. What would you start as far as developing and training? What's kind of a high level first step that you would take?
Okay. For that individual that's decided and passionate that this is needed, and there's whatever the reason, they have that passion to do something and they think it's important. The first thing you do, and again, it could happen a million ways, but my advice in general would be, okay, if you believe in it, there's many others. You feel it's only you, but if you actually ask and reach out, you'll find there are many others. Build a team. Get some people together that have the same goals, that have this passion to add value. Okay. When you can do that, it's not something you have to ask your boss. You don't have, you start a little clique and mentor yourselves, share, and then show a couple small wins. Tell your bosses, hey, we're doing this. Do you see this? It starts with if you really, really believe you can do it, have confidence, try, and then share it, because it's like the snowball. You know, the snowflake melts, but if you can get a few flakes together, it becomes a snowball, and that can roll through the organization. So my suggestion to that, again, don't wait for somebody. You can do it. And as small as it may seem, as futile as it may seem, it makes a big difference. Small wins, passionate togetherness, and teamworking is critical. Now, if I were to say the bigger, okay, what else can we do when you get to that level? It can happen in many ways. And it comes with communication, and a lot of that communication, there's somebody saying it, but you have to convince the others to believe it. From a business standpoint, if you're very dry about it, it's easy. Pull up some of the data and show everybody. Say, here's the latest Harvard Business Review. You know, it's not like you're making it up. Just show these are the facts. Business people should understand that, okay? If it's, oh, my boss understands that, but understand who you're trying to convince, not for yourself. Convince them for their benefit. Bring them the value that they'll understand, and then people will jump on board. Don't fight the fights that are not worthwhile. Fight the fights that add value. And I don't want to say it as a fight. I'm just saying that's an example. It's very hard, but if you make it simple, it's very doable. Right? So I don't think I'm saying anything so different than what probably everyone knows.
Well, you've read my script, Danny, because the next question goes over to Nancy, and you were mentioning about trends, and we're lucky enough that Nancy can double hat as a strong woman leader, but you are also in a position to see best practices in several organizations. And what do you see that are the trends around allyship and sponsorship? And in organizations, specifically right around Japan as well.
Yeah, thanks. And Danny had so many great pieces of advice, and it's such wise messages. So to build on that, I mean, there are several things that I'm seeing in the marketplace right now, and some of the more progressive companies really are talking about allyship and allyship more broadly. I think allyship historically was used in conjunction with LGBT+ allies, which is absolutely critical. We need visible allies for LGBT+ advancement and inclusion. But a lot of the more progressive companies are taking that much more broadly and saying allyship is really, and Yuta did such a great job explaining it earlier, and to say it very simply, it's allies help to create that equitable workplace, to level the playing field, to allow people to have that voice. So they may not be a sponsor because maybe they don't even know you, but they're opening that door. So what some companies are doing is really embedding it into their inclusion journey. They're adding vocabulary or creating vocabulary and creating expectations about the responsibility for allyship. And they're doing a really good job of storytelling, helping stories help people really understand what does it mean? Because you say allyship, like what does that exactly mean? How do I do it? And how does it benefit people? So, I think it was touched upon earlier, either the talent review process. I think it was mentioned a couple of times, and that's such a critical stage in a person's life, a person's career. And so, asking questions in that talent review process, maybe you're not even the person leading the discussion, but if somebody says something like, oh, it's okay if she doesn't get promoted this year because, she doesn't want to get promoted anyway. So don't just take that for face value. Someone should say, how do you know? Like just drill deeper, to unearth what is it that they're really trying to say, and not in a combative way, but just in an inquisitive way. Like that's part of being an ally and creating that expectation that, people are going to question what you're saying, that we're just not going to take it for face value. Also, another example around storytelling is noticing, like another really critical event is when you're having meetings, which we have all the time, right? So when you're in a meeting and you have someone that's quiet, maybe because English is not their first language, or maybe it's just somebody who's more shy, like look and see, like, do they look like they have something to say? And if so, then open the door. Or maybe you don't want to put them on the spot. And so you institute like a raise hand policy. So if you have something to say, and you know how, as an American, like we just jump in and talk on top of each other. So maybe you don't allow that. Maybe you say, okay, you got to raise your hand if you have something to say. And that's the type of thing that creates the level playing field. Or you say, okay, I'm now going to go round robin and just see if each person has something to say. And that way, also someone who's not as comfortable speaking up can be prepared to say something. So those type of stories to help people understand what an ally actually can do are really powerful. And then also to hear from the person who was allied or was the recipient of an ally action, to hear what it meant to them. I think those stories are really important. So that's what some of the companies are doing. that I'm working with that are really more progressive and really trying to embed allyship into their culture.
Great, thank you for that. I'm so far, really the big takeaways I've gotten from you and Danny tonight are a lot around education, educating. You're creating this environment where you have a dialogue and then creating stories and vocabulary around it, and celebrating and creating wins would be things that I would take away, as far as that just seems so important, building that through an organization. Danny, maybe with your organization, you could share what you've done that has worked, and even maybe more importantly for us, what hasn't worked around sponsorship or allyship programs that you've had.
Okay, thanks. I'll start with maybe some practices that are good, because the ones that haven't worked, we have a lot, because that's the learning process, right? So I'll try to be positive on the first side. I mean, we look, as an organization, it's kind of cookie cutter, you understand, but from our CEO at our corporate level, we have our Global Inclusion Council, and he's brought in leaders. That messaging is brought out constantly, and then those roll down into goals, targets for everybody. But those targets are targets. But from an activation standpoint, then you see we now have by regions. In APAC, you have that council. And then in the APAC council, we actually have Japan members, not myself, one of our very passionate leaders here in Japan. Okay, hey, you're now our leader. So he participates in the APAC Inclusion Council. He brings that back, and now we have our Japan Inclusion Council, which leads to our Baxter Women's Network and everything we're doing in Japan. So you kind of make sure that you're keeping people involved and understanding the opportunities and where the company's going, and you show that you're doing it and the opportunities to move up, because we're all working for a company, for an organization, for a reason. And so that's kind of the framework, and that works really well, because then when you get to our group here in Japan, again, we're being sponsors and mentors. That's kind of part of our program. You fall from that and you go into the women's leadership group, and then you go into what we call women mentors, and you have a group of people that they could be women mentors for women, men for women, but they're all in a structured program that actually doesn't be a one-off. It actually grows into a longer strategic program where somebody, a mentee, after a couple of years, 1 year, they're really doing good. They feel comfortable. They can start being mentors themselves, and they can start extending the group to build the team. So you build the structure. I think that's critical for companies, to get it to be embedded in what you do. And we take that, and I'll leave that there, but we take that, and I'll give you the example why that's so important, and that's from something we know clearly doesn't work or did not work. And the example in our inclusion diversity, corporate was saying everything, everyone's here. I get the company, we're saying, okay, what are we going to do? We're not really moving forward. What are we going to do? I made the mistake. I admit it. I made the mistake. I said, hey guys, let's do something. And so we started, and we had a journey. We had a manager, because to me, this is a long-term commitment. It's a strategy. It's got to be have the processes behind it in I&D and where we take ourselves, in assuring that our female colleagues can be successful, right? And what we did, we took, here's a successful female colleague. She's a leader. She was one of the leadership teams. She's, and had her sponsor, and she did a big event, and we did internet and had everybody listen. And it was a one-off event plan. And lo and behold, she's successful because she was already successful. She's no longer with Baxter and she's gone. So it was like set ourselves up for failure because we didn't think it out. We tried to act, which is good. Nothing wrong with why. Our failure was the plan. So I suggest everyone have a strategy, have a plan. It has to be sustainable. It won't happen in a year, it won't happen in a month. Otherwise, there would be no issue in Japan. It would already be done. So let's be realistic about it. Let's make sure we have strategic plans in place as a company, as responsible leaders, to assure that people are successful. And that the reflection is make sure we understand privilege. People don't talk about that so much. But I became who I am today because I was probably very privileged. And until I learned that, I didn't understand it. And so I think it just shows it's going to take us a while to get there, but there's so much benefit. There's so much opportunity for those in the organization that can do this. And we just need to be realistic. But again, the best practice is make sure it's corporate wide. Make sure you're doing it in a structured way. Make sure it's not a one-off event. What happens next? After you've mentored someone for 6 months or a year, whatever your programs are, what does that mean to them? And so you have to have a plan, is my basic point. And it's not easy. Let's just admit that, but let's also put in the effort to make sure it's successful.
That's great. Yeah, we've lost sound, Dan? Okay. Thank you, Danny. That's good. A couple of takeaways I like for that is not everything's going to reach everybody. And I mean, we've seen that in rewards programs and all other things. Some people will be motivated by one thing, some people will be another. And if you're taking that long-term view, and it's strategized, it will make an impact. And you're doing enough different things eventually will catch everybody, but not everything will catch everybody. And it's, having that expectation is not realistic. I have a question for both of you. One of our participants comes from an organization that they have a division it's an IT division that's mainly male dominated, and they were asking, that they're trying to get male leaders engaged in diversity initiatives. How can they, get certain divisions which are more male dominated, more engaged, even when it seems outside of what's going on with the rest of the company? Who would like to jump in on that one?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. Danny, you said some of it already, right, around making sure that they understand the business case. Why is this important to them? In today's environment where, people are resigning, they've had a chance to reevaluate their priorities in life, and people are resigning. So even, and technology has such a high turnover, right? So that I would say help them understand the business case and why it's important to them. But one thing I do want to say too is just to kind of think from a different perspective. A lot of company initiatives around gender are focused on the women. We have a women's network. What else do we need, right? The women are talking to each other. The women, they can talk to each other. I think that network is important, having that community, but that's not going to fix the problem. The women are not broken. It's the culture that's broken, right? The women aren't broken, it's the culture. And so you need to fix the culture. And who is controlling the culture right now? In Japan, corporate America, in many countries, It's the men are setting the tone. They're the leaders. They're setting the culture. So you need to focus on the culture. And so engaging the men and helping to define what is the culture that we need and want, and engaging the men in helping to create that culture, along with the, how does this culture help us get to our strategic business goals? There has to be a connection to the business strategy, and there's such a clear connection to the business strategy, to the bottom line, to your talent strategies. So that's what we do. And then as Danny had talked about earlier, and I'm sure you do this, Danny, it's then, to the leaders, you got to hold your leaders accountable. As one of the most inclusive leaders that I've worked with, I was so impressed with him. He came into Japan, so he didn't really know the culture. He didn't know the past and the history. But he sat in the talent review and the promotion process meeting. And he looked at the list, and to every one of the partners, which were all men, I was the only female partner, he would say to them, "Why does your list have no women on them?" There's, I don't have anyone qualified. And he would just drill down, as I said earlier, he drilled down deeper. How do you know? Did you ask them? And so he would just keep going until he really drilled his point down and he wasn't going to get any further. And then his next question, he pivoted and said, "What are you going to do today to build that pipeline so that when I see your list next year, it's not going to look like this?" And so he had them in that meeting, and the meeting ended up lasting like 3 hours longer than it was intended to. He had them come up with a list of specific actions and people that he was gonna focus on. And then he met with those leaders every 3 months and said, "What are you doing? Is this person, and he held them accountable. And I will tell you that next year, we tripled our partners. We promoted 2 more partners, very qualified women who should have been promoted probably 2-3 years ago. But those type of things, engaging the men and holding the men accountable for their actions, which again, Danny, I'm sure you probably do that. But I think that's really, really important. Don't just, ask them one question and then, oh, okay, they don't want to get promoted. That's fine. Hopefully next year you'll have someone that's not going to move the dial.
Thank you. That's a great, that's exactly.
I'm getting so preachy.
That's what we should be doing, right? You got to be very careful about this, because I actually got pushback on one side. So you got to be, and in my example here, but if you think about filling this pipeline in a male dominated, let's say IT, if that's what it is in Japan, you're going to hire, we need to replace, we're going to build a team. So that's what, if you accept the norm, that's what naturally you'll get, right? So if you're saying internal, who are our candidates? Yeah, you have what you have. So you start out with most companies, we're going to hire the best qualified people. We're going to expect the best. We're not going to accept any less. That's what we want. But the minute I start looking at that, I ask, well, here's our 5 talent management partner companies that introduce people to us, as every company has. And I say, well, wow, here's the 15 list. There's no women. Why not? I said, so here's the first thing I want our HR talent management team to do. And I talk to that, and they work on it, and it's not always perfect. But I said, do all of our partner companies understand that I expect, if they're going to introduce 3, I want at least 1 woman on the list. Okay, that's the requirement for them to be part of our partners. And then you'll slowly see it's not a list of 5 men, it's 3 men and 2 women. And then you interview and you hire the best person. The best person will be the person you hire. But if you don't have that choice, on the other side, if you're not offering the opportunity, it will never happen. So I never say, oh, she's a woman, let's hire her because she's a woman. But because I say hire the best person. But if the women aren't in the choice, there's a problem. So you have to start at the very basics of the issue. And as the company grows and does a great thing, and you're a wonderful company as we all want to be, naturally, we would be very diversified. So it comes to me at the very basics to start. And that's what I encourage. And I think it's important for companies to understand. It's not going to happen overnight. Even for me and for Baxter, we struggle with that in Japan. But I still feel passionate about it. It's if you don't offer the opportunity, no one has a chance. And if I have a group of a bunch of people, I'll paraphrase a great friend of mine, Steve, who is one of my peers in Australia. And his point is, hey, give everybody a voice at the table. It doesn't matter where they sit in the ranking. If they're sitting there, they all have something to say. Let's listen. Let's give them all a voice. And that's the basics of building the organization to move from a male-dominated thing to an inclusive environment.
That's great. Well, thank you. We're in the time is not our ally this evening. Unfortunately, we're running out of it. But what I'd like to do is, just kind of 1 minute each, kind of a takeaway, an omiyage, if you will, for people here tonight that you'd kind of want people to take back to their place of work. Danny, do you want to start us off?
I would just say, whatever you can take back from this, I hope it helps, but it'll come down, every individual makes a difference. Any little thing you could do to try to make yourself and your organization inclusive, it helps. Don't give up because you're by yourself. Don't be the snowflake and melt. Become part of the snowball and move it. So just be confident you're doing the right thing.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Dan. Nancy?
Just again, the women aren't broken, it's the culture. And every person can influence the culture. And it's the little things, it's the day-to-day things, it's when we're on calls and how we interact with each other and give each other a voice. So be an ally, create a safe space and level the playing field for everybody that you interact with.
That's great. Fantastic. I know it's I've been, just to finish up our conversation, I know that being a recruiter for 25 years in Japan and an executive coach, and we've got, it's such a tight market, a talent market in Japan. And I think, again, as you said it so well, the women aren't broken. Most people aren't broken. And that's, if we need to start building that network, that allyship, the sponsorship, that's so vital. And what I see when I'm doing executive coaching is that the leaders or potential leaders have great skill sets, but the thing that they're lacking is that sponsorship, or they're lacking the network, and they're lacking someone to help guide them, and that alliance-ship that Nancy, you were talking about, you were so lucky to have. And if we can, throw out that hand, that helping hand, and build that environment, that's so potent, and it helps not only your organization but our communities and the whole Japan economy. There's a trickle down. I want to thank Nancy, Danny. You guys are so wonderful and insightful, and just thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your experience, and your thoughts. Keep doing wonderful stuff and good within the markets. We appreciate it. Yuta, in conclusion, thank you for your remarks, your insights, and that's just very insightful information that we can take back, especially as Danny said, have some information at hand. This is information, this is knowledge that you can use to persuade those who might have questions and might not have all the facts. This is where you can get that, and you can reach out to leaders like Nancy, Yuta, Danny, and ask them and gain that guidance and insight for your organization. So I would stress that importance. Yuta, any other remarks, any other housekeeping items where we can find people and learn more about this, etc., before people run off tonight?
Sure. Thank you so much, again, and Danny and Nancy for very informative session. And also thank you, David, for, being excellent moderator. And so as you can see the screen right now, it's really, like, as Danny and as Nancy mentioned, it's really important to be kind of realistic and also like equip the right information for addressing gender diversity. Like David has been in the, recruiting firm for 25 years. I have been driving in D&I for like 15 years. So, we also are happy to provide solution with you. Sorry, we couldn't answer one question, but like, please feel free to reach out to us. And also, we are happy to discuss, how to address sponsorship program, allyship program, or, any other, like biases we can tackle in other practical solutions. Oh, thank you so much for joining. And also, your solidarity means a lot to us. So, we hope, like we can, move forward, gender diversity, from today. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Right. So shall we close the event?
Yeah. Sure.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for
So
having us.
Thank you both so much. Have a fantastic evening.
You too. Have a good day, Yuta.
Take care, everyone. Hey, we
Bye.
can make a difference. Everyone makes a difference.
One person at a time.
Thank you very much. Thanks,
Thank you very
Yuta. Thanks,
much.
David. Thanks, Nancy, for
Thank
the
you.
opportunity.
Thank you,
You
Danny
guys
and
are
Nancy.
great.
Have a fantastic evening. Thank you.